Outside of your top two promotions of WWE and AEW and all your other TV wrestling products exists the independent wrestling scene, which has more promotions and wrestlers a part of it than ever before. And with lots of wrestlers comes a few outliers and a few dodgy ones amongst the crowd who for various reasons have effectively been blacklisted from wrestling. And today we're gonna go over a few of those cases as we discuss wrestlers who were ousted from the scene and told not to come back, as this is the Wrestling Blacklist. You might recognize the last name Gulak and think of Drew Gulak, and the person we're talking about today is actually Drew Gulak's brother, Rory Gulak, who you might not have even known was a wrestler. He made his wrestling debut in 2008 for Combat Zone Wrestling and continued the next few years working for promotions in his home state of Pennsylvania. Eventually he'd start to work across the rest of the country more and would be a journeyman of the independent scene alongside his brother Drew, who he would sometimes team with and also work against. Drew Gulak was signed to the WWE in 2016, but Rory would remain on the indies, continuing to work for various promotions, and in 2017 he would become a trainer at the Wrestle Factory. This was a wrestling school ran by the promotion Chikara, and the same school that Rory Gulak himself had trained at to become a wrestler. And everything seemed all fine and dandy as he continued to be a journeyman of the indies whilst training others. However, in January 2020, that would all come crashing down for him when an allegation was made about him that boiled down to him owning and showing others images that can be described with the letters C and P. And the very next day, on January 6, 2020, Chikara and Wrestle Factory posted a joint statement that read, "Last week, both Chikara and the Wrestle Factory severed ties with Rory Gulak. We take allegations of misconduct very seriously. In accordance with this, we cooperate completely and transparently with all law enforcement agencies. Our priority is and always will be the safety of our fans, cast and crew." And since this, Rory Gulak hasn't worked a match again and is nowhere to be found in the wrestling industry. If these allegations are indeed true, then how long was he doing this for, and how long did he have those images for? And the fact that he was training wrestlers whilst allegedly having those images is just insane. That person should not be training other wrestlers. On June 22nd, 2014, wrestler Michael Elgin became the Ring of Honor World Champion, beating Adam Cole for the title at Ring of Honor Best in the World 2014. It was perhaps the biggest championship Elgin had ever won in his 10th year of his professional wrestling career, as up until this point, Elgin had been a stalwart of the independent scene, having wrestled and been very successful in many companies, including but not limited to Combat Zone Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, IWA Mid-South, and he also wrestled for companies in other countries such as DDT and New Japan. Michael Elgin would hold the Ring of Honor title until September of that year, losing it to Jay Briscoe, but even though he lost it, Michael Elgin was now in the best years of his career. He'd work more with New Japan through Ring of Honor's working relationship with them and would start getting very popular in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He'd win the never openweight 6-man tag titles alongside Tanahashi and Yoshitatsu, and they would feud with the Elite over them, which also saw Elgin defeating Kenny Omega to win the IWGP Intercontinental title. At the end of 2017, Michael Elgin began teaming with Jeff Cobb in the Global Tag League, but behind the scenes, a lot was going on. And that's because in December of 2017, a woman accused one of Michael Elgin's trainees of SA, with the woman sharing multiple screenshots of DMs between herself and Elgin, accusing him of mishandling the allegations and ignoring them, choosing to do nothing about it. Screenshots were also released showing him making disparaging remarks about his tag partner Jeff Cobb. Following these allegations, Elgin was pulled from many indie promotions' dates. However, New Japan did keep him around and kept him teaming with Jeff Cobb a little while longer, which must have been super awkward. And the rest of Elgin's run in New Japan was awkward in general. He won the never openweight title in 2018 to the shock of many fans. However, he was eventually let go in April of 2019. He then signed to TNA in 2019 where he didn't really do much, and then during the speaking out movement in 2020, the allegations against Michael Elgin resurfaced, as well as new allegations of him sending explicit photos to a woman which also surfaced. TNA at first suspended him indefinitely, but he was eventually fired as a result of these allegations. He would mostly disappear from wrestling, where he would occasionally work the indies, and he had a run-in with the law during this time, as in July of 2021, he was arrested after violating a protection order filed by his ex-fiancée. No charges were filed in the end, and in 2022, after 2 years of inactivity, Elgin would make appearances for Pro Wrestling Noah in Japan, and even win the GHC tag titles. However, just 2 months later, he was stripped of the titles and removed from future Noah shows due to his run-ins with the Japanese law. The crime, you ask? Shoplifting protein powder. Yes, he was supposedly in trouble for shoplifting protein powder, and whilst Elgin denies this, he was never invited back to a Noah show ever again, and those Noah shows were back in 2022, and they were his last real big opportunity and platform that he had, and nowadays he only occasionally works for low-level indie promotions. Marty Scurll debuted in 2005 and would start working across the UK scene, and his first global exposure didn't come until 2012 when he was on TNA's reality show British Boot Camp, a show where the winner was signed to TNA. Marty Scurll did not win this show and would not sign with TNA, but throughout the next few years his stock would keep rising. He would continue to rise up through the British wrestling scene, becoming one of the top names in the scene, and in 2015 he would expand his work to America as he began to work more regularly in the States. He'd wrestled for Jeff Jarrett's Global Force Wrestling, as well as working for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, working both of their Battle of Los Angeles tournaments in 2015 and 2016, where he even won the tournament in 2016. And that same year in 2016, Marty Scurll would sign with Ring of Honor, and this is where his career would really take off, as he was part of Ring of Honor during a really big era for the company, where the Bullet Club were running the show. Marty Scurll quickly won the Ring of Honor TV title before the year ended. Then the next year in 2017, he was revealed to be the newest member of the Bullet Club, and being part of the Bullet Club was huge for Marty, as this was the prime of the Bullet Club, with the shirts at Hot Topic and the Funko Pops out, and talks of them holding their own promoted show in Chicago, which they of course did. It was of course called All In, and of course it took place in 2018 to a sold out crowd at the Sears Center, which all seemed unprecedented at the time. Scurll was a part of that show, losing to Okada in the co-main event on the longest bout of the card, and this show was the precursor to the formation of AEW, so when AEW did form in 2019, everyone assumed Marty Scurll would go along and join with the rest of the Elite, but he actually stuck around in Ring of Honor. He'd stick with them all throughout 2019, by which point Ring of Honor was a shell of itself, and he decided to stay through 2020, as well as becoming the head booker for some reason. Ring of Honor was taken off air due to the pandemic, and during the pandemic, Scurll would face some accusations. Scurll was accused by a woman of SAing her 5 years prior, when he would have been around 27 and when she was 16 years old, as well as intoxicated. Scurll admitted that this incident and scenario did take place, but insisted that everything explicit that took place was all consensual. Ring of Honor launched their own investigation into it, and when Ring of Honor did eventually return to air, Marty Scurll didn't return along with them, as his profile was removed from Ring of Honor in October 2020, and they mutually departed in January of 2021. Marty Scurll would disappear for a while, but would return to wrestling, where he now wrestles in Mexico, where he seemingly sought to give his career a hard reset. And most likely because promotions in America and the UK don't exactly want to use him. Marty Scurll is now forgotten about, and nobody really wants to see him in any major promotions, and it's crazy to think about because people really thought that this guy was going to go to AEW, and if he did go to AEW, he probably would have been one of their top stars. But nowadays, Marty Scurll, like the rest of the wrestlers on this list, finds himself blacklisted. That's it for me though, guys. Like the video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe for more wrestling content. I'll see you all in the future. Goodbye and keep on rolling.